The house was too quiet that morning. Quiet in a way that made Marjorie Hale tighten her shawl around her shoulders, as if the air itself carried a warning. The sun had barely risen, and yet a strange heaviness pressed against the old wooden walls of her Michigan farmhouse. The ticking clock on the kitchen wall echoed louder than usual, like it was counting down to something she couldn't see. "I've lived in this house for 40 years, she murmured to herself, fingers brushing the carved oak table her late husband built. And suddenly, it doesn't feel like mine. Her breath fogged slightly in the cool air. The heater was off. Odd, since she always left it running this time of year. She shuffled toward the thermostat, rubbing her hands for warmth. That's when she noticed it. A stack of medical papers on the entryway console. Papers she knew she didn't leave there. Her son, Colton Hale, had come by the night before, unannounced again. He always had an excuse. "Just checking on you, Mom. Just want to make sure you're safe. You shouldn't strain yourself at your age." At her age, she was 72, not helpless. But lately, Colton had been talking to her like she was fading. She picked up the papers. The smell of fresh ink hit her. Someone had printed these recently, very recently. She flipped through the pages, her heartbeat hitching. Medical reports, assessments, recommendations, and a note clipped on top. "For Dr. Rowan Mercer, urgent. Please update my mother's file accordingly. C. Hale." Marjorie felt her teeth press together. Her file. Update it with what? And why was her son changing anything without telling her? She steadied herself and sat down, the old rocking chair creaking under her weight. Outside, the wind rattled the porch wind chimes, soft, eerie, metallic. Her eyes scanned the papers again. Something was wrong. The information wasn't familiar. Conditions she never had. Symptoms she never mentioned. And worst of all, notes implying cognitive decline. Decline? Her mind was steady as ever. She rubbed her forehead, trying to remember the last few weeks. Little things surfaced. Colton asking unusual questions, subtly correcting her, repeating things she hadn't forgotten. Was he trying to make her doubt herself? A cold feeling swept down her spine. She folded the papers with hands that trembled, not with weakness, but with anger, and placed them on the coffee table. The phone rang. She stiffened. Only a few people called her this early. The caller ID flashed. Dr. Rowan Mercer. Her doctor. She picked up slowly. "Good morning, doctor. I was just about to call you." "Marjorie," Dr. Mercer said, voice low and careful in a way that instantly raised her suspicion. "I received some documents regarding your condition, and your son insisted I review them before your appointment today." "My condition?" Marjorie whispered. "Yes," the doctor continued. "He claimed there were developments. Developments." There it was again, someone else narrating her life. Her grip tightened on the phone. "Dr. Mercer, I need to speak to you privately today, not with Colton in the room, alone." A brief pause. "Of course. And Marjorie, something about these papers doesn't look right." Her pulse thudded loudly in her ears. "I thought the same," she said quietly. "I didn't write them, I didn't approve them, and I didn't authorize any changes." The doctor exhaled sharply, as if he too sensed a darkness creeping beneath the surface. "Come in as soon as you can," he said. "We'll talk." She hung up and placed the phone down, then slowly rose from the chair. Her house still felt too quiet, too still, too watched. She stepped toward the hallway, and her foot brushed something under the runner rug. She frowned. The rug was usually flat, perfectly smooth. She bent down, lifted the corner, and froze. There was something tucked underneath. A folded paper, yellowed at the edges, but recently placed with no name. No sender. Just one line written in shaky ink. "You're not imagining it. Check the locked drawer." Marjorie's breath caught her heart pounded. And suddenly, the house didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt alive. Listening, Marjorie straightened, staring down the hallway, realizing someone had been inside her home, and they wanted her to know. Marjorie stood motionless in the hallway, the slip of paper trembling between her fingers. Check the locked drawer. Her locked drawer. Only 2 people knew about that small built-in drawer behind her bedroom dresser: her late husband and Colton. Her stomach tightened, a slow, heavy ache that spread through her ribcage. "This is madness," she whispered, but the words felt hollow. Something was shifting around her life, subtle but undeniable, like someone rearranging furniture in the dark. She slipped the mysterious note into her pocket and walked toward her bedroom. Her slippers brushed quietly against the wooden floor. The smell of old cedar and lavender, her usual comfort, felt strange today, almost too sharp, too awake. When she reached the dresser, her breath caught. The drawer key, normally hidden behind a photo frame, sat openly on top of the dresser placed there, displayed. She touched the key, feeling its cold metal bite into her skin. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, as if the walls leaned closer to listen. "What are you doing, Colton?" she whispered. Her hands shook as she inserted the key. The lock clicked. The drawer slid open. Inside were documents she hadn't seen in years, financial forms, her original medical records, her living will, and a new file she didn't recognize, a manila folder labeled in bold marker, "Care Transition Plan, Marjorie Hale, drafted by C. Hale." Her knees weakened. She sat on the edge of the bed, opening the folder. The pages outlined everything, from her supposed memory problems to recommendations for supervised living arrangements, all signed with a signature that looked familiar but wasn't hers. Forgery. Her son was forging her name. Her throat tightened. Her chest stung with something far heavier than fear. Betrayal. Deep and raw. She flipped through page after page, her mind spinning. Why would Colton do this? Money? Control? Some misguided sense of responsibility? She couldn't tell. Not yet. But she knew one thing. He wasn't being honest. Her fingers traced the last page, noticing faint indent lines, as if there had been another sheet pressed on top of it recently, torn off in a hurry. Someone had been working in this drawer. Someone had been planning. A sudden creak echoed from the living room. Marjorie froze. She wasn't alone, but no footsteps followed. No door. Just silence. Still, she felt eyes on her. She placed everything back carefully, except the forged papers, which she slipped inside her sweater, and locked the drawer again. Her breathing was uneven as she walked to the kitchen and made herself tea, needing the routine to steady her. The kettle hissed softly, steam rising like a ghost curling toward the ceiling. She sat at the table and dialed her oldest friend, Helen, someone she trusted more than anyone alive. "Helen, honey, I think something's wrong," she said, as soon as her friend picked up. Her voice cracked. "Something with Colton. Something with my medical files." "Oh dear," Helen replied, worry thick in her tone. "Tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Marjorie inhaled shakily and told her about the papers on the console, the note under the rug, the drafts forged in her son's handwriting, the key left in the open, piece by piece, the architecture of the betrayal unfolding in her trembling voice. Helen listened quietly, letting her speak. Then, softly, "Marjorie, this sounds deliberate." "I know," she whispered, And dangerous. I know. A tear slid down Marjorie's cheek before she could stop it. I don't understand why he'd do this to me, Helen. I raised him alone. I gave him everything I had. Before Helen could respond, a sudden static crackled across the phone line. Helen, are you still there? More static. Then, a faint voice, cut off. Helen? Marjorie stood from her chair, her heart slamming against her ribs. Helen, can you hear? The line went dead. The silence that followed was enormous. She slowly lowered the phone, her hand shaking uncontrollably. And as Marjorie stared at the silent phone, she realized this wasn't just a misunderstanding. Someone didn't want her talking to anyone. Marjorie barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the forged documents flashed behind her eyelids like silent threats. By sunrise, she sat by the window with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the soft morning light spill across her backyard. The dew sparkled like tiny crystals on the grass, normally calming, but today it only reminded her of how fragile her life suddenly felt. She needed answers. She needed the truth, not assumptions, not fear. As she stirred her tea, a memory surfaced. Colton at 16, lanky and shy, sitting at the kitchen table late at night. He had asked her how signatures worked, how people learned to copy handwriting for art projects. She remembered laughing, telling him, "Your hand carries your intention. A signature shows who you are." Now she wondered if that moment had planted a seed she never noticed growing. Her phone buzzed. A text from Colton. "Morning, Mom. Dr. Mercer wants to adjust your paperwork. I'll pick you up at 2. Her breath tightened. He never texted her about appointments. He always called, always explained. This felt rehearsed, and she hadn't even told him she needed to see the doctor. Something was wrong. Deeply, frighteningly wrong. Marjorie stood from her chair with a newfound determination. She needed proof. Something solid, something no one could twist. She went to the locked drawer again. The moment her hand touched the wood, a chill ran through her. A faint smudge, fingerprints, near the keyhole. She unlocked the drawer and examined its contents more carefully. Beneath her old documents, tucked between 2 outdated insurance forms, she found a folded receipt from a print shop. Mercer copy and ink, 4 pages notarized format. 3 signatures scanned customer, C. Hale. Her stomach dropped. He was copying her signature professionally. Her son, her own flesh and blood, had gone to a print shop to fake legal documents. Her fingers trembled as she slipped the receipt into her pocket. She needed someone neutral, someone outside the family who could see what was happening without emotional fog, and that person was Dr. Rowan Mercer. She had known him for years. Kind eyes, steady voice, patient with her questions. He had never seemed aligned with Colton in any way. She called the clinic, and to her relief, the receptionist answered. "This is Marjorie Hale," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Is Dr. Mercer available for a private consultation without my son?" The line was quiet, too quiet. Then the receptionist whispered, "Mrs. Hale, I need to check something. Can you hold for a moment?" Papers shuffled. A drawer opened. When the receptionist returned, her voice was lower, cautious. "Mrs. Hale, according to the system, your son requested all your consultations. Include him from now on. All appointments are marked. Family supervised required." Marjorie's heart pounded. "What?" she whispered. "I never approved that. Mom, I know the note looks unusual. Dr. Mercer didn't write it." The room tilted for a moment. She gripped the armrest of her chair to steady herself. "Mrs. Hale," the receptionist continued, "if you come quietly around the back entrance at noon, Dr. Mercer will make time for you. Don't tell anyone you're coming. The call ended. Marjorie exhaled shakily. Someone at the clinic knew something wasn't right. She had to leave the house without alerting Colton, which meant acting completely normal until noon. She tidied up, made breakfast, hummed to herself, even though her hands trembled while buttering toast. Every shadow felt too still, every sound too loud. At 11:40, she slipped a lightweight coat around her shoulders and walked out the back door, avoiding the front where neighbors might mention seeing her. She took the old walkway behind her garden, cracked concrete, weeds pushing through, toward the small lane that led directly to the clinic. When she arrived at the back entrance, her pulse was racing. Dr. Rowan Mercer himself opened the door, his expression concerned. "Marjorie," he said, guiding her inside. "Your son came to see me. He said things, concerning things we need to talk privately." Her mouth went dry. "What did he say?" Dr. Mercer closed the office blinds. "He claimed you've been confused, that you can't manage your affairs. He asked me to sign off on new care arrangements." She felt cold all over. "And I refused," the doctor added, "because nothing about you suggests confusion." Marjorie almost cried from relief, but Dr. Mercer wasn't done. "There's more," he said, lowering his voice. "Your son didn't know I'm legally required to record visitors. Yesterday, he wasn't alone." Marjorie's pulse quickened. "Who was with him?" She whispered. Dr. Mercer opened his appointment log, pointing to a name written beneath Colton's, a name that made her entire body go still. It was the name of someone Marjorie had trusted for decades, someone who should never have been involved. Yet they were meeting with her son behind her back. Marjorie stared at the appointment log, her breath caught between disbelief and dread. Evelyn Brooks, her oldest friend, her coffee companion, her neighbor for 23 years, the woman who held her when her husband died, who prayed with her on the porch during storms, who brought soup when she had the flu. Marjorie blinked hard, thinking her eyes were playing tricks, but the name remained etched on the paper like a wound that refused to close. "Evelyn," she whispered. "She was with Colton?" Dr. Mercer nodded slowly. "They arrived together, and they acted familiar, coordinated, as if they'd planned what they were about to ask." Marjorie's stomach tightened. "Planned what?" she asked. The doctor hesitated, choosing every word carefully. "They wanted me to sign a statement, saying you no longer have full cognitive clarity, that you're prone to confusion, that you require assistance managing legal and financial affairs." Marjorie felt the room tilt. "That's a lie," she said, the hurt sharp and immediate. "It is a lie," Dr. Mercer replied gently. "But they presented fabricated medical notes, ones I knew I hadn't written. Forged notes, forged signatures, forged trust." Marjorie pressed a hand to her mouth as the realization formed. This wasn't just Colton's scheme. This was a partnership. Evelyn, smiling, gentle Evelyn, was helping her son control her why. What did they want? Dr. Mercer continued. "I suspect they're preparing a case to claim legal guardianship. Usually this happens when someone wants access to assets. Assets, money, property." For so long, Marjorie had believed her life was simple. Just her pension, her modest home, and a few savings accounts. But then it struck her, the land. The land her late husband left her quietly, away from paperwork Colton ever saw. Acres in her name only. If sold, it would be worth hundreds of thousands. She steadied herself, pushing back the storm rising in her chest. "Doctor," she said slowly, "if Colton is trying to take guardianship, there must be something he needs to prove, something he's missing." Dr. Mercer raised an eyebrow. "Correct. He would need undeniable proof you're mentally compromised." He folded his hands. "He doesn't have that. And from what I've seen, He won't get it. A flicker of hope. Tiny, but alive. Still, the betrayal cut deep. Evelyn, the woman who knew every scar in Marjorie's heart, had sided with her son, had plotted behind her back, had her name written in black ink where loyalty should have been. Marjorie closed her eyes. Memories returned like jagged shards. Evelyn asking casual questions about her property taxes. Evelyn encouraging her to let Colton handle her mail. Evelyn joking that Marjorie shouldn't stress over paperwork anymore, signs she ignored, warnings she brushed aside, because she trusted her. Tears filled her eyes, but not from weakness, from awakening. When she opened them again, there was steel where fear had been. "Doctor," she said, sitting straighter, "I need copies of every real medical document you've written for me in the last 2 years. Originals with dates and your seal." Dr. Mercer nodded with understanding. "You plan to collect evidence?" "I plan to protect myself," she replied. He spent the next 20 minutes printing official documents, true records untouched by Colton's interference, and placed them in a sealed envelope. But then he did something unexpected. "Marjorie," he said quietly, "before they left yesterday, Evelyn dropped something." He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a small, floral-patterned notebook. Marjorie recognized it immediately. Evelyn's handwriting journal. She carried it everywhere. She felt her pulse quicken as she reached for it. She shouldn't open someone else's notebook, but Evelyn had crossed that line first. Inside the front cover was a list of dates, a list of meetings with Colton, a list of topics they discussed, and at the bottom, written with chilling certainty, "Final step, secure Marjorie's signature or replicate it. Ownership transfer must happen before her next evaluation." Marjorie's breath trembled. They wanted the land, all of it. Dr. Mercer touched her arm. "You're not alone in this, and now you have proof." Marjorie stared at the notebook, her pulse pounding in her ears. Because the last page wasn't a plan, it was a warning, a reminder of the next meeting time. Tomorrow morning, at her house, when she'd be alone. And as Marjorie read the final sentence, written in Evelyn's unmistakable cursive, her hands went cold. "Tomorrow, we finish what we started." Night wrapped the old house like a dark woolen shawl, heavy and suffocating. Eleanor stood at the doorway of the attic, her heartbeat tapping like a distant war drum beneath her ribs. The final pieces of the truth she had uncovered, in Part 4, had rearranged everything she thought she knew about her family, about the past, and especially about the quiet, patient menace hiding in the shadows of her life. And now the moment had come. No more letters, no more half-truths, no more running in circles around ghosts that refused to stay buried. She took a slow breath, gripping the railing as she climbed the creaking stairs, each step a reminder of her own trembling resolve. "You've survived the unknown this far," she whispered internally. "You're not walking into darkness, you're walking into answers." The attic lights flickered on after a hesitant click. Dust swirled, catching the faint beam like memories refusing to settle. In the center of the room stood the chest. The same chest whose hidden compartment had revealed the shocking letters, the letters that exposed who had been manipulating her life from the shadows. The letters that linked every strange event she had experienced back to a single name, a name she had once trusted, a name she never expected. Eleanor swallowed the ache building in her throat. As she stepped forward, her fingers hovered above the chest's old brass latch. The air felt different, charged, restless, as if the house itself was holding its breath. She remembered the final line of the last letter. "You will understand everything when you're ready to confront me." She had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but the truth demanded a confrontation. She opened the chest slowly. Inside, everything remained just where she had left it, except one thing. A small envelope now rested on top of the letters, one she was certain had not been there before. Her pulse spiked. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a single sentence, handwritten in the same unmistakable script. "Meet me where it all began." There was no signature. There didn't need to be one. Eleanor's chest tightened. She knew exactly where it all began. The old woods behind her grandparents' abandoned property. The place she had not visited in more than 15 years. The place where the first secret had been buried. The place connected to the person she once considered her safest companion. She grabbed her coat and hurried downstairs, every shadow whispering warnings she refused to acknowledge. The wind outside howled with an eerie familiarity, as if echoing memories she had tried for years to forget. The forest waited. By the time she reached the path, the moon had slipped behind clouds, dimming the world to shades of silver and ash. Branches arched over her like ancient guardians, all watchers. Eleanor's breathing grew shallow, but her steps were steady. She followed the narrow trail deeper and deeper until the trees parted, revealing the clearing, and there, standing exactly where the old swing used to hang, was the silhouette. Tall, motionless, waiting. Her heart thundered in her chest. As she stepped closer, the shadow lifted its head. The faint moonlight filtered through the branches just enough to reveal the outline of a familiar face. Older now, sharper, hardened by time, but still unmistakable. Her voice cracked. "Why, after all these years, why drag me back here?" The figure didn't answer immediately. Instead, they tilted their head as though studying her reaction, studying whether she had truly unraveled everything, whether she was ready. A slow, unsettling smile formed. "You finally found the letters," the voice said, calm, steady, chillingly controlled. "Good. Now you're ready to hear the truth. The real truth." Eleanor's breath stilled, the night tightening around her like a closing fist. "And what truth is that?" she whispered. The figure stepped forward, the crunch of leaves slicing through the silence. "The truth," they said softly, "that everything you uncovered so far is only half the story." Eleanor's eyes widened. Half? Her pulse hammered. Before she could speak, a sudden gust of wind swept the clearing, followed by a sound behind her. Branches snapping, footsteps, someone else approaching. She turned sharply, but the darkness swallowed every shape. Her voice trembled. "Who's there?" No answer, only the whisper of movement. She spun back toward the figure at the swing, but they were gone, vanished. Her breath caught. And then, from behind her, a quiet voice murmured, "Eleanor, you shouldn't have come alone." The world froze, and the truth she feared most felt closer than ever. Dawn arrived quietly, as if the universe itself wanted to offer Eleanor a gentle moment before life moved forward again. Soft sunlight filtered through the curtains of her small kitchen, casting warm golden rectangles across the floor. The storm from the night before had passed, leaving the world washed clean, symbolic, almost intentional. Eleanor sat at the table, with her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. Her breathing was slow, steady, the rising steam warming her face. She had survived the confrontation in the woods, survived the revelation that everything she feared had only been the beginning of a much deeper truth. But she had survived something far more personal than mystery or betrayal. She had survived herself, her doubt, her guilt, Her fear of remembering now, in the softened morning light, she felt different. Not untouched, not unscarred, but awakened. On the table beside her lay the final letter she had received after the encounter, left quietly on her doorstep at sunrise. Unlike the others, this one held no threat, no puzzle, no manipulation, only a confession and an apology. A voice once trusted had broken under its own past, trapped beneath years of secrets and the misguided desire to protect her from truths they believed she wasn't strong enough to carry, but they were wrong. She was stronger than she had ever imagined. She opened the window slightly, letting the fresh morning air glide in. The scent of wet soil and blooming jasmine drifted through the room. A symbolic gesture, small but powerful, the world opening up again, allowing new breath, new life. On the countertop was the old wooden box she had recovered from the attic. Last night she had made a decision. She wouldn't burn it. She wouldn't hide it again. She would restore it, piece by piece, memory by memory. Because healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about facing it with open eyes and an honest heart. Eleanor took a soft cloth and gently wiped away the dust clinging to its edges. She traced the carvings with her fingertips. Each line felt like a story, each notch a truth. It no longer felt like a prison. Now it felt like history. Reclaimed, a small vase of fresh white flowers sat beside the box. Daisies, simple but pure. She had picked them at dawn, wanting to bring light into the space that had once held so much fear. The petals glowed softly in the morning sun, a reminder that beauty can grow quietly, even in the darkest places. As she finished polishing the box, she felt something shift inside her, an opening, a release, like a knot finally loosening. She understood now that forgiveness wasn't about excusing the past. It was about freeing herself from its weight. She walked to the mirror in the hallway. For the first time in a long while, she saw not a frightened woman haunted by shadows, but a survivor, a seeker of truth, someone who chose courage even when fear felt easier. Eleanor smiled, small but real. She gathered the letters, the ones that once felt like traps, and tied them with a soft ribbon, not to preserve the pain, but to preserve the lessons. These were the pieces of her journey, proof of her resilience. Before stepping outside, she paused by the doorway. The morning sun warmed her face. The world felt new. Her path felt open, and for the first time, she felt ready to walk forward with clarity, not confusion. She whispered to herself, almost like a promise. The truth didn't break me, it rebuilt me. With that, she stepped into the sunlight. Her story was no longer about secrets. It was about strength. And she was ready for whatever chapter life held next. What would you have done in her place? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this story moved you, like, follow, and save for more emotional journeys. See you in the next chapter of life and mystery.